beyond a typical young wizard. Armor shield. Bill relied on his own confidence, swiftly casting a protective barrier in front of him as the spell approached. Whoosh! The blast of magical force struck his shield, shattering it instantly. Bill's previously calm and confident expression froze. Before he could react, the ground vanished beneath his feet, and as chaos enveloped his senses, a sickly green light made his pupils snap shut. The hidden attacker finally revealed a glimpse of their menace. Watch out! Even at the last moment, Bill shouted a warning to Amasta. Foom! The killing curse struck the ground, igniting an emerald flame that rose like a reaper dancing in fire. Amasta rolled to evade the lethal beam, slowly rising from the ground. Despite his precautions, the ambush of an unforgivable curse still left him shaken. That instant, since entering the wizarding world, had been the closest he had come to death. 20-something, female. From the hand gripping the wand, exposed outside a black cloak, Amasta deduced the attacker's gender and approximate age. The oppressive silence gnawed at Amasta's mind, every cell trembling under the omnipresent threat. Fear and exhilaration surged together, heightening his magical energy to unprecedented levels, as if his body had been anticipating this life-or-death challenge. No matter who you are, no matter your purpose, Amasta's cold voice fixed on the hooded figure whose face remained hidden. Breaking into Hogwarts under the very nose of Headmaster Dumbledore and using the most dangerous of the unforgivable curses on a minor, I must admit, I respect your audacity. You have guts. The woman said nothing, only issuing a disdainful snort, clearly unwilling to reply. Dumbledore and the professors will arrive in 5 minutes at most. If you run now, maybe you'll make it. Her grip on the wand was steady, unwavering, sinking Amasta's heart. She clearly intended to take his life. But why? Since arriving at Hogwarts, he had offended no one. His interactions outside the school were limited to selling potions via owls. Had one of his concoctions accidentally killed someone, prompting vengeance? Impossible. Amasta trusted his own skill. Such a tragedy would not occur. He could not fathom her motive. The attacker gave him no time to think. She knew he wasn't bluffing. Dumbledore and the professors were indeed close. Tonight, the deadliest duel would begin. The green light flaring across the Forbidden Forest heralded the life-and-death struggle. Amasta's expression was solemn as never before. He raised his wand like a king wielding his sword, striking down. The glowing tip surged with boundless magic, spilling out like a collapsing dam. Under the dark night, the energy transformed into a silver river of stars, pounding the earth with immense force. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The ground trembled violently. The massive stone blocking the space between them shattered into dust. Tens of thousands of frost-laden leaves rustled in a terrifying chorus. When the dust settled and the spell light faded, the soft earth revealed a gaping fissure, 70 or 80 feet long. This spell, Amasta's answer to the woman's killing, had made a statement. Chapter 16. Rampage. Blinding. Jagged streaks of curse light suddenly flared and vanished in the dimness. In the otherwise silent forest, the constant thunder of trees snapping and crashing to the ground mingled with explosive booms. The two duelists moved rapidly over the uneven terrain, using fallen branches, vines, and thick underbrush as cover, each maneuvering for a slight advantage. Within just half a minute of the battle, Amasta had already confirmed two things. First, the black-robed witch facing him was clearly targeting him, and with lethal intent. She showed no hesitation in using black magic forbidden by the Ministry, including the unforgivable curses, as well as other high-risk spells designed to kill or maim. Her sole goal was to eliminate him as quickly as possible. It was utterly ridiculous. Amasta's face darkened, and fury burned in his eyes. Who could harbor such hatred toward him that they were willing to end his life? Second, her practical combat experience was formidable, far beyond his own. During the brief engagement, her nimble footwork for dodging spells was nothing short of a dance master's precision. Her deceptive attacks, surprise maneuvers amid high-intensity dueling, and her skillful integration of transfiguration, tactical spells, and black magic left Amasta in awe. By comparison, his own secret dueling practice and occasional sessions with Professor Snape barely qualified him as a novice. Of course, he had his own advantages. If Amasta were to judge, this battle was the clash of an assassin and a master. The Black Witch seemed like a carefully trained assassin. Every spell and attack was merely a tool to kill. honed for efficiency rather than artistry. Amasta, however, pursued the essence of magic itself. In tracing the origins of modern spells, he had developed a unique path. If he persisted, his achievements would one day draw the world's attention. Most of the spells he used were refined through countless experiments, powerful and difficult to block directly. The only drawback was their immense magical cost. He already regretted relying on a display of power spell at the outset. It had drained a significant portion of his magic without effect. The Black Witch had also cast a disguise charm on herself. While her magic couldn't be hidden entirely, it made pinpointing her position difficult. Coupled with her constant movement and silent casting, she could strike directly face to face with near perfect stealth. Fortunately, Amasta's learning ability was exceptional. He quickly adapted, and soon the duel looked less like two students fighting and more like two transparent phantoms hurling spells at each other. Whoosh! A torrent of blazing fire surged from a half-shattered boulder on the slope, rising with the wind into a wall of flames. Fire drakes, sphinxes, chimeras, and other flame-formed beasts howled and roared silently atop the inferno. The Black Witch made no attempt to control the fire, letting it spread indiscriminately while she repositioned herself and melted into the shadows. Amasta pressed his lips tight, hatred burning in his gaze. At his current level, he could not dispel the inferno outright, but he could not stand by and watch it consume the forest. If he did, the unfortunate Gryffindors would be trapped and likely perish in the flames. He waved his wand rapidly, summoning a controlled wave of golden fire into the air. This fire was derived from the raging blaze but modified for restraint. Less destructive than the witch's inferno, it was easier to control and would not cloud his judgment. Using fire to combat fire, this was a clever and measured defense. Amasta contained the flames, isolating the fiery wave from spreading further. He increased the output of his magic, intent on gradually consuming the raging fire. I don't even want to imagine what happened there, Snape. How many lives were lost? Professor McGonagall's lips were pressed tight, her face ghostly pale as she stared toward the Forbidden Forest, where the gold and white flames illuminated half the sky. Abandoning all semblance of deputy headmistress decorum, she sprinted wildly, completely ignoring her once perfectly styled hair, now cascading untamed. Snape's complexion was equally sallow, barely better than McGonagall's. Since the night Lily had died, it had been years since he had prayed for anything at all. At the castle gates, Professor Flitwick misstepped on a stair, tumbling awkwardly. Professor Sprout, having lost merely steadied him as she passed, then without a word raced toward the Forbidden Forest. Whoosh! Whoosh! After a prolonged stalemate, the Dark Witch, unable to defeat Amasta directly, resorted to a more insidious tactic. She transformed scattered stones into sharp daggers and launched a dozen or more at the Gryffindors, who had been moved to an open space by Amasta. No matter who you are, I will make you pay a bitter and unforgettable price. Amasta's rage threatened to burst from his eyes, yet his right hand kept the controlling flames steady. His left hand hurled a milky white orb of light. The orb reached Bill and Charlie before the daggers, instantly expanding into a semicircular, upside-down, transparent, bowl-like magical shield, intercepting the oncoming blades by a hair's breadth. Even the Dark Witch hadn't anticipated this maneuver, and she froze for 2 seconds. Those 2 seconds became the decisive moment. Amasta snapped his right hand back, shaking his wand violently. The stones beneath his feet transformed in the blink of an eye into a long, verdigris-coated spear, shooting forward like a streak of cold lightning, appearing almost instantly before the Dark Witch. Clang! At the last moment, the witch conjured a barrier of black mist. When the spear collided with it, a deafening metallic crash echoed, before both vanished into faint sparks. Though blocked, the violent impact sent her magical energy into turmoil, leaving her mind momentarily blank. Divine edge, shadowless. Finally seizing the opportunity, Amasta unleashed his fiercest roar yet. The invisible void resonated with a sharp clang, and in an instant, a spectral reaper swung its scythe above the witch, descending with cold, decisive fury. Meanwhile, having just entered the Forbidden Forest, Snape heard the familiar violent roar. His body shook uncontrollably, his face turning from yellow to black, and the next second he surged forward, running with all his strength. Chapter 17. Trust gone? Amasta's face showed complete shock as he stared at the spot where the Dark Witch had stood, a mixture of disbelief and confusion on his features. Was it apparition or a portkey? The thought flickered through his mind, only to be immediately dismissed. Hogwarts, as everyone knew, was protected by countless powerful enchantments. Conventional teleportation was impossible within its grounds. The magical defenses drew on centuries of accumulated power from the castle itself, a force on a completely different level. Even the reincarnated founders would struggle to breach it. Yet, in reality, the mysterious Dark Witch, at the instant the divine edge, shadowless spell fell, glared at Amasta with hatred, and then, unwillingly, vanished into thin air. Amasta's eyes scanned the surroundings in disbelief, searching for any trace. But the Dark Witch was truly gone. She had not merely slipped into stealth. How could this be? Though they were deep in the Forbidden Forest, they hadn't breached the magical perimeter set by Hogwarts. Theoretically, they were still within the school grounds. Amasta no longer had the energy to try to suppress the lingering blaze. He stepped forward cautiously, moving toward the last place the black-robed witch had stood. The previous shadowless spell hadn't been entirely fruitless. There was a pool of dark, crimson blood on the ground, presumably left behind by the witch. In the distance, the sound of hurried footsteps approached. The school's professors had finally arrived. Amasta's gaze lingered on the blood that had yet to fully seep into the soil, his expression tight with frustration. A witch so powerful and filled with hatred for him had been lurking in the shadows, spying on him, yet he had no knowledge of her identity. The thought churned in his chest, a bitter pang of indignation. "You left traces," Amasta murmured to himself. Before Professors McGonagall and Snape arrived, he pulled out a small vial, drawing the blood into it, and then cast a freezing charm over the bottle. "I will find you." Snape and McGonagall weren't the first to arrive. Albus Dumbledore had beaten them to the scene. Through the scorched, smoke-filled air, a brilliant scarlet flare suddenly appeared. Grasping his phoenix's claw, Dumbledore materialized midair without warning, landing gracefully on the ground. Despite his age of over 100, his agility and poise were that of a much younger man. Once on the ground, Dumbledore quickly scanned the area. His piercing blue eyes behind half-moon spectacles blazed with fury as he took in the scene. Amasta standing amid scorched earth, the unconscious members of the Gryffindor Quidditch team, and Bill still suspended midair. In the unseen currents of magic, a furious Dumbledore was like a gravitational black hole. The instant he appeared, the magical atmosphere surged and roared as if under the influence of a full moon's tidal pull. The first thing Dumbledore did was extinguish the lingering flames Amasta had been unable to control. With a casual flick of his wand, both the pale, ferocious fire and the golden flames Amasta had summoned vanished completely. "Hand over your wand, Mr. Brain." Dumbledore's tone was calm, yet it carried an unyielding authority. Amasta hesitated. He had no desire to surrender his wand. Everything that had happened tonight could be explained. But even this brief pause nearly brought disaster upon him. Tonight, Amasta finally witnessed a side of Albus Dumbledore unknown to most. The side hidden beneath the genial, kind face familiar to every Hogwarts student. This was the Dumbledore who had once bested the first Dark Lord, Grindelwald, the contemporary wizard who had kept the second Dark Lord at bay for nearly 30 years, the most powerful wizard of the era, whose reputation alone rivaled the entire ministry, the president of the International Confederation of Wizards. At this moment, to disobey him was to rebel. Without any feint or prelude, Dumbledore simply raised his wand and cast a disarming charm. Yet with his overwhelming, unmatched power, the spell's light split the surrounding space into hundreds of crackling lightning filaments. Amasta's scalp tingled and his face turned pale. The silver-black vortex of magic he had so easily wielded against Charlie and the others shattered in an instant under the onslaught of Dumbledore's spell. Still, Amasta was not one to surrender. Pride surged in him. In a flash, he swept his wand, summoning from the void a massive silver shield engraved with a golden serpentine pattern intercepting the spell's path. Thud! The heavy, resonant sound rolled through the forest like distant thunder on a winter night. Amasta saw stars flash before his eyes, his legs buckled, and he stumbled backward several steps. Even Dumbledore seemed momentarily surprised that Amostar Brain could block his spell. A flicker of astonishment crossed his blue eyes, but it was just a flicker. "Stop, Headmaster Dumbledore!" At that moment, Professors McGonagall and Snape finally arrived. McGonagall, seeing the devastated forest, staggered, hands flying to her mouth in disbelief. Snape, tougher than her, dashed toward Dumbledore, shouting to halt him. "Wait, Dumbledore! There must be some misunderstanding here." Boldly and without hesitation, Severus Snape grabbed Dumbledore's hand, preventing him from acting further. Then, drenched in sweat, Snape scanned the area. When he spotted Bill Weasley suspended in midair by the inverted bell spell, his breathing suddenly grew sharper. "The bell drops." He released Bill, and the dazed young man tumbled comically to the side as he hit the ground, fear written all over his handsome face. It wasn't until Professor McGonagall leapt past Snape and Dumbledore to gently calm him that Bill finally regained his bearings and took in the situation. "Professor McGonagall, I saw it. Someone used the killing curse. Just now, I swear. I saw it clearly." The words left his mouth like a gust of icy wind, and everything fell silent. Snape, still gripping Dumbledore's hand, felt the old frail wrist tense, as if trying to pull away from his control. "Hand over your wand first, Amostar." Snape, his expression taut, glanced toward the lone figure standing there. Amostar Brain. His tone was unwavering. "Trust me, Amostar, misunderstandings can be explained, and I believe you." Chapter 18. A frightened Hagrid tick. Somehow, the sun had risen high, casting its steady light and warmth across the snow-blanketed ground, making it sparkle. Sunlight streaming into the small, dim hut brightened the interior. Water droplets trickled from the melting icicles under the eaves, forming a clear puddle on the floor. When I returned to the castle the next day, having heard of the events and seen that part of the Forbidden Forest myself, you three can imagine just how shocked I was. The hearth had dried the water in the kettle, so Hagrid hurriedly lifted the scalding pot and pushed the door open. Outside, the ice cracked and hissed beneath his steps. In a moment, he returned carrying a kettle full of crushed ice. When he saw the three still frozen inside, mouths slightly open, Hagrid couldn't help but laugh. "Looks like you lot really enjoy this story, huh?" "Enjoy?" Ron sprang up with a loud squeak, his ears red, shouting excitedly to Harry. "Why didn't anyone ever tell me about this at home? Well, maybe Bill and Charlie did, but I forgot. Don't look at me like that, Hermione. I was 6. How could I remember?" "Anyway," Ron turned to Harry, panting as he shouted, "Can you believe it, Harry? He was only in 5th year back then, around the same age as Percy now. If someone told me Percy could go toe-to-toe with Headmaster Dumbledore, I'd have laughed until graduation." Harry grinned, understanding Ron's point. "Has anyone ever done it, Hagrid?" Harry's voice was high-pitched with excitement, his blood practically boiling, as if he'd been the one dueling Dumbledore, though he knew he would never oppose the venerable headmaster. "Don't even think about it, Harry," Hagrid chuckled. "No 5th-year wizard could do it. Maybe one could, but he wouldn't be as capable. And forget wizards who aren't of age. Even across the entire British wizarding world, you'd be hard-pressed to find a few who could match Hogwarts' greatest headmaster in a duel." Hagrid's pride was evident, and you had to admit, he was telling the truth. "Quiet!" Hermione, equally overwhelmed, sharply scolded the overexcited Harry and Ron. She had to admit she was thrilled herself. She had never imagined that the handsome, refined young wizard she had met last night in the infirmary had such a remarkable record. "And then, Hagrid, your story isn't finished." Hermione gripped Harry's invisibility cloak tightly, her amber cat-like eyes fixed on him. "How did they handle him? I mean, Mr. Amostar Brain?" Harry and Ron immediately fell silent as well, eagerly waiting for Hagrid to explain. "Let me think." Hagrid twirled his sausage-like fingers through his thick beard. "They apparently kept him in detention for a whole term and docked Slytherin 200 points. But not long after, Headmaster Dumbledore gave him back 400 points. That nearly guaranteed Slytherin the House Cup that year." 400 points back?" Harry exclaimed. "Last year, when they protected the Sorcerer's Stone from Quirrell and Voldemort, that had been one of the proudest moments of his school life. Dumbledore had only rewarded them 170 points, of which Harry personally got a mere 60. What on earth was Dumbledore thinking? Though there was little reason to compare, Harry couldn't help feeling a little unfairly treated. "Come on, Harry!" Hermione raised an eyebrow. a confident smile playing at her lips, as if she already knew everything. The detention and point deductions were because Mr. Brain broke school rules. He snuck into the Forbidden Forest at night and used extremely powerful magic against his classmates. But the 400 points he was awarded afterward, that's because he saved the entire Gryffindor Quidditch team and Bill. Saved them? Ron's expression twisted in confusion. But weren't they the ones knocked out by Brain? Don't be ridiculous, Ron, Hermione said, exasperated. Think about it. If Mr. Brain hadn't gone into the Forbidden Forest that night, who would have run into that mysterious black witch? Ron sucked in a sharp breath, eyes widening in realization. Charlie and the whole Gryffindor Quidditch team at the time. Hermione nodded, satisfied. Exactly. And with Bill, that means he saved 8 people's lives at 50 points each. So that means Hagrid, Dumbledore confirmed there really was a black witch sneaking into Hogwarts. Did he catch them? Harry, more alert than Ron or Hermione, suddenly remembered to ask. Yes, he confirmed it. Hagrid's smile faded, his expression solemn. That night, once Bill woke up, the misunderstanding was cleared up quickly. He told Dumbledore that it wasn't Amostar who cast the killing curse, but the hidden black witch. Dumbledore personally examined every spell Brain's wand had released that night and verified it. Later, Dumbledore carefully studied the battlefield. You know, Harry, with Dumbledore's skill, he could almost reconstruct the entire fight. Unfortunately, after searching for a long time, he couldn't find the audacious Black Witch. I barely slept for 2 months after that, patrolling the Forbidden Forest every night. Hagrid blinked, looking at the three now fully realizing the gravity of the situation. At the time, the incident caused quite a stir. The Ministry even sent elite Aurors into the forest to search, but they found nothing. To prevent panic from spreading, Dumbledore and Fudge decided to keep the attack under wraps. That's why most people never really heard about it. The atmosphere turned serious. Harry and Ron exchanged a glance, both wondering if that Black Witch might have been one of Voldemort's followers like Quirrell. That's why, Ron, you must have heard of him, Hagrid chuckled. Professor Snape let Amostar Brain out during the second-year Quidditch final. Before that, he had to serve detention every night and every weekend in Snape's office. Charlie's Gryffindor team was very strong. They had a real shot at winning again. But when Snape brought Brain onto the pitch, you can imagine how Priyan and Feloria reacted. Honestly, them not immediately hopping on their broomsticks and fleeing was already worthy of Gryffindor's name. Looks like Slytherin occasionally produces someone remarkable, Ron muttered quietly. There are plenty of famous Slytherin wizards, Ron, Hagrid laughed. He glanced outside at the sun and realized it was late enough for lunch. The story's over, little ones. Do you want to stay for lunch here? Oh, Hermione snapped back to attention, calling out in alarm, Damn it, Madame Pomfrey, I completely lost track of time. She threw the invisibility cloak over herself, leaving only her head visible. Next time, Hagrid, I need to stay at the hospital wing for now. And with that, she rushed off. Harry and Ron, clearly preferring the school food, hurried to follow her. Oh, wait. A somewhat disappointed Hagrid suddenly remembered something and called after Harry's rapidly receding back. You three still haven't told me why you were asking about Brain. Mr. Brain has already returned to the school. Harry didn't look back, only waved his hand above his head. He's now the investigator for the Chamber of Secrets incident. Clang! Crash! Startled, Hagrid leaned against the door of the hut, which shook violently under the impact. The snow on the roof, already partially melted, cascaded down, burying Fang beneath it. The Ministry's Chamber of Secrets investigator? Hagrid's face went pale, and he whispered to the doorframe, That's impossible. Dumbledore. Oh no, I have to figure this out. After a moment, Hagrid slammed the door shut, and amidst Fang's frantic barking, strode off toward the castle without looking back. Chapter 19, The Cunning Amostar. Amostar didn't know that Harry, who had never met him, already had the full story of his school-time achievements from Hagrid. Even if he had known, he would probably have just smiled. By dawn, having only gone to bed around 2 in the morning, Amostar was already up. One of the perks of being a wizard, a highly skilled wizard with excellent memory and magic stamina, had far more energy than a muggle. For over 3 years, Amostar had grown accustomed to a life of constant upheaval. Often, to complete a client's task, He would spend over 10 days in remote wilderness, primeval forests, or deeply buried ancestral ruins, living off the land. Sleeping on a warm bed for a few hours was a rare luxury. Though the weather had cleared, the morning chill persisted. The snow on the lawns showed no sign of melting, and the ice on the frozen lake was as strong as serpentwood. Amasta paused under a willow during his morning run along the lake and spotted a shadow moving quickly toward him from the direction of the castle. Dumbledore asked me to give this to you. The pale gold sunlight, flecked with a fine dust, struck Snape's face, softening his cold, rigid features. A few steps away, he tossed a black pouch toward Amasta. How much in total? Amasta jiggled the heavy pouch in his hand, asking with interest. 2,000 galleons. Dumbledore generously added 200 more on top of what you requested. Humph. McGonagall wasn't too pleased about it. By the way, she just learned you've returned to Hogwarts and wants a private word with you about your next plans. Tut tut. Meeting with the stern deputy headmistress didn't faze Amasta. He opened the pouch and peered inside. The dazzling golden gleam instantly lifted his spirits. So, tell me, what would happen if I just took this money and ran? Unless you can escape to the moon, I wouldn't advise such a foolish act, Snape replied coolly. He watched Amasta, who was staring at a coin between his fingers, his eyes shimmering. Also, I should warn you, Amasta. I don't know, and I don't particularly care, why your eye color has changed so drastically since your school days, but Dumbledore seems very interested. He's asked me to find out. Usually, when he's curious about something, he'll stop at nothing to understand it. So, I suggest you be prepared. Amasta's fingers froze briefly. After a moment, they relaxed and he murmured with a hint of meaning, Ha! Truly an extraordinary wizard. Compared to the ever-changing Muggle world, the mainstream wizarding society evolved at a glacial pace. Though calls for private reform had grown louder in recent years, those voices were like seeds buried in frozen soil, waiting for the right moment to sprout. Hogsmeade, the only remaining purely wizarding village in Britain, had changed very little since Amasta's school days. The few updates were minor. New items had been added to the signs of Zonko's joke shop and the Honeyduke's candy store. Amasta even suspected that if a medieval wizard somehow appeared in the modern world, he might not even get lost in Hogsmeade. It was still the Christmas holiday, and the streets and alleys of Hogsmeade were quiet, with few people in sight. The occasional passerby moved briskly, busy with their own affairs. Amasta walked deeper into town, braving the north wind, until he stopped in front of a shop with a gray, dusty glass window. Davis Bant's Magical Supplies. That was his destination. Ding, ding, ding. The brass bell hanging above the door jingled sharply as Amasta pushed it open and stepped inside. The dimly lit shop was filled with tall, ceiling-high shelves crammed with items. On the aging shelves were seer mirrors, memory balls, pixie repellents, flying broom care kits, Quidditch equipment boxes, and a variety of other magical supplies and alchemical tools. Mr. Bance, slightly balding, seemed unprepared for an early customer. He looked momentarily startled, but quickly recovered and hurried from behind the counter with a polite smile. Welcome, esteemed customer. Whatever you need, Davis Bant's Magical Supplies has it all. I'd be happy to assist you. Oh, thank you. Amasta, glancing up at the towering shelves, nodded in acknowledgement. Do you have a panoramic telescope? If you mean the kind usually used to watch Quidditch matches. Bance hurried to a shelf near the inner wall, leaped up, and retrieved a dusty binocular-style telescope from a jumble of items. While shielding it from the customer's gaze, he quickly wiped off the dust on his robe, smiled brightly, and returned to Amasta. This one is from our family's alchemy workshop. Top quality, I assure you. Only 9 galleons and 7 sickles each. Amasta took it in hand. He was familiar with this model, which could be adapted for multiple purposes. After adjusting the knobs with practiced ease, he lifted it to his eyes and carefully scanned the view. No. After a moment, Amasta lowered the telescope, his tone tinged with disappointment. I need the Trace Chase 190 model. The image is clearer and it can trace further back in time. This is the 185 model. Not quite what I need. Mr. Bance's expression stiffened. He realized he was dealing with a connoisseur. I'm afraid, sir, the high-precision Trace Chase 190 is generally only produced during the World Cup. Normally, we only sell this model. If you want to purchase it, though, I can offer a small discount. How much of a discount? Amasta's expression was indifferent, clearly unwilling to settle. He became the shrewd buyer, beginning to negotiate. Nothing more. 9 galleons. That's cost price. But since you're my first customer today, that's the price. Mr. Bance looked pained. And if I need a lot? I'm sorry, sir. That's the best I can do. Even if you want more, I need 300 of them, Amasta said with a smile, straightforwardly. Mr. Bance, you have one chance to quote. If your price isn't satisfactory, I can always check Diagon Alley. 300? Mr. Bance's eyes widened in shock, but he quickly realized his reaction could hurt the negotiation. He composed himself, cleared his throat, and spoke carefully. Yes. Cough. I mean, that's certainly a large quantity. It does justify a further discount. He eyed the smiling Amasta cautiously. Sir, if you truly intend to buy that many, I think 8 galleons and 10 sickles is a fair price. Amasta frowned slightly, showing displeasure. Quickly sensing the need to adjust, the clever Mr. Bance changed tack. 7 galleons and 10 sickles. You're a knowledgeable wizard. You understand what this price means. Amasta did indeed know his stuff. Without another word, he turned and left, pushing the door open and walking away with not a trace of hesitation. Ding! Before Amasta could even count to one, a sharp clanging of brass bells rang out behind him. Mr. Bance came storming out, flustered and exasperated. How about 7 galleons, sir? That's already fair. Amasta didn't turn around. He drew his wand, ready to apparate. Blast it! Mr. Bance shouted again. Fine. 6 it is. Come back, sir. You're the cleverest customer I've dealt with all year. Amasta lowered his wand and turned, showing a cheerful smile once more. Very well, Mr. Bance. Now let's discuss the delivery schedule in detail. Chapter 20. Meeting with Professor McGonagall. The final price for the panoramic telescope came to 5 galleons and 10 sickles each, slightly cheaper than Amasta had expected. There was no avoiding it. Mr. Bance needed an entire week just to prepare 300 telescopes. When Bance sent Amasta off, he wore a mournful expression, as though he had lost a small fortune. Amasta thought he was exaggerating a bit. Most magical items and alchemical tools cost around 40 to 50% of their sale price. Including taxes and operating costs, it rarely exceeded 60%. This deal, well, Bance certainly wouldn't be losing money. The negotiation over the 7 sickles was grueling. By the time Amasta left the shop, the sun was already high in the sky. He stood in the middle of the street, letting the warm sunlight bathe him, savoring a rare moment of comfort. Since graduation, such a calm, unhurried pace of life had been entirely foreign to him. Yet another, even more difficult negotiation awaits. He drew a deep breath and looked toward the castle, standing tall against the blue sky. There was someone there waiting for him, someone he would need to persuade, and he knew the conversation wouldn't be easy. By mid-morning, around 10:30, Amasta returned to Hogwarts. To avoid interrupting lunch, he hurried up the marble steps, adeptly navigating the moving staircases to enter the second-floor Gryffindor student activity area. From the far end of the corridor came the rough sound of an argument. Amasta craned his neck to catch a few words, but couldn't make sense of them. Pressed for time, he quickly turned to another corridor and knocked on the door of an office. Please come in. The stern voice behind the door brought memories rushing back. Amasta smiled faintly, twisted the handle, and stepped inside. Professor McGonagall's office was much smaller than Snape's, the walls lined with towering stacks of papers, students' homework and classroom teaching materials piled everywhere. Her small desk sat by the window, perfectly aligned with the Quidditch pitch. When Amasta entered, she was bent over reviewing documents. With sharp eyes, Amasta quickly glanced at the pages. It appeared to be midterm teaching material purchase requests submitted by various professors. Oh, Amasta? McGonagall looked up from her work, adjusting her black-framed glasses. When she recognized him, her tightly pressed lips relaxed slightly. You've matured quite a lot since 3 years ago. I almost didn't recognize you. She rose to assess the Slytherin student standing before her, her expression far gentler than it usually was with students. Honestly, before Amasta reached 5th year, their interactions had been limited to the occasional classroom exchanges and his annual financial aid applications. Beyond that, she had paid little special attention to this otherwise unremarkable Slytherin. That changed on the night before Christmas during his 5th year. In a very short span, Amostar Brain completely reshaped her opinion of him, first from extreme dislike to profound gratitude. Since that night, she had kept a close watch on Amasta. "Long time no see, Professor McGonagall," Amasta greeted her with a sincere smile. "You haven't changed much compared to 3 years ago." As Professor McGonagall scrutinized him, Amasta returned the gesture with a polite smile. His earlier comment had been a courteous compliment, though in truth she had grown a little older, slimmer, with more white in her hair. It was unavoidable. With a headmaster like Albus Dumbledore, so insistently responsible it was just her luck. The window of the room was open, carrying a faint scent of violet wine. Professor McGonagall gestured for Amasta to sit while she moved to the fireplace, taking the teapot from the mantel. "Last night, Headmaster Dumbledore left me a message informing me that the Board of Governors had assigned you to return to school," she said, her tone tinged with slight disapproval, though it was unclear at whom. "Anyway, Amasta, welcome back to Hogwarts." Amasta took a small sip of tea. Bitter enough to make the scalp tingle, it was evidently McGonagall's brew to sober oneself up. He placed the cup down without another sip. "Thank you, Professor McGonagall. I'm glad to have the opportunity to return to Hogwarts. As you know, many young witches and wizards dream of coming back here after graduation to relive the carefree days of their school life. Yes, so many people have fond memories here." Amasta's words seemed to please her, and her shoulders relaxed slightly. "By the way, if I'm not mistaken, this is only the second time we've spoken face to face, isn't it?" Amasta nodded, recalling the past. "You're correct. It was during the second half of fifth year. You sought me out to persuade me not to deliberately make mistakes on assignments after class, to instead reflect my true abilities. Ah, I'm sorry, Professor. I was indeed a bit eccentric back then. Snape once told me that you called this behavior pretending to be a snot-eating dragon. Quite an apt metaphor, Amasta, but this time it's you trying to convince me." Professor McGonagall didn't mind spending a little more time talking to Amasta. It was part of her duty as deputy headmistress to better understand him. Unfortunately, she had a long list of tasks ahead. After managing Hogwarts' daily operations, she needed to prepare the next year's curriculum, adjust faculty salaries, and review several transfiguration papers submitted to Transfiguration Today. Because of these pressing duties, while other professors enjoyed their holiday breaks, she had to schedule her time carefully just to attend even a single social event. "Headmaster Dumbledore asked me to arrange your accommodations and office," she said, her lips pressed tight and her expression serious. "I had planned to meet with you after dinner, but when I ran into Professor Snape this morning, he mentioned your plans, so I had to speak with you sooner. Normally this would be Headmaster Dumbledore's responsibility, but, well, never mind that," she added, frustration creeping in. Taking a deep breath, her gaze sharpened, and she asked pointedly, "I'm not questioning the feasibility of your plan, Amasta. My concern is this. Do you really think it's appropriate to monitor the daily lives of all the young witches and wizards just to identify the heir of the Chamber of Secrets?" Amasta understood her concern. He didn't reply immediately, but sat in quiet reflection. After a moment, he lifted his head and met Professor McGonagall's stern gaze calmly. "The key issue, Professor, lies in choosing what to prioritize." Professor McGonagall's lips moved slightly. Smart and capable as she was, she had no doubt already anticipated much of what Amasta would say. "Choices," Amasta continued. "We both know the kind of crisis Hogwarts is facing right now, Professor McGonagall. None of us want to see it come to ruin. But if the current dire situation cannot be alleviated, if it continues unchecked—" He seemed to catch a flicker of hesitation in McGonagall's hawk-sharp eyes and spoke calmly. "While the Slytherin heir of the chamber remains hidden, the petrification of 2 young witches and wizards will not be the end of this series of attacks. There will be others, Professor. Can you guarantee that petrification will be the only outcome?" McGonagall's gaze wavered and her breathing grew heavy. "Reality is cruel, bloody cruel, but we must face it, because avoiding it solves nothing," Amasta said rationally. "I don't understand why the hidden assailant didn't simply kill Colin Creevey or Justin Finch Fletchley. Perhaps they merely take pleasure in instilling fear without wanting to end a child's life. But, Professor, do you really want to pin your hopes on the mercy of an enemy? I understand, Amasta. At the mention of the word kill, McGonagall's slender frame shuddered. She sniffed, and the hard shell of composure she usually wore began to crack. Dumbledore hasn't said anything, but I can see he's worried about exactly what you're suggesting. Yet, Amasta, we are not the Ministry of Magic. We don't have the authority to. Freedom and rights are meaningless in the face of noble life. Amasta raised his voice, cutting her off sharply. I understand the concerns of the school. Yes, I can imagine the backlash if young witches and wizards, their families, or even public opinion discovered that Hogwarts was monitoring their every move. But I believe it doesn't matter. If our actions can save even just one child, then any criticism the school faces is worth it. McGonagall fell silent, her mind torn. Her long-held principles and clear reasoning were locked in fierce conflict. If we follow my initial plan, Professor, Amasta rubbed his stomach. He was starting to feel a bit hungry. Gather everyone in the Great Hall. Use Legilimency or Veritaserum on them one by one in the entrance hall. Those cleared could wait in the courtyard. Perhaps within a day, we could resolve this entirely. Absolutely not. McGonagall snapped to full attention, shocked by Amasta's utterly unrestrained proposal. She immediately rejected it. That would be a severe violation of the law, Amasta. If we did that, Hogwarts might close before the heir even strikes. Amasta shrugged, feigning innocence. Just an idea, Professor. I didn't intend to actually carry it out. In the end, McGonagall was convinced. Inevitable, really. Unless she could produce a fully effective plan next term, the Hogwarts castle, with its countless corridors, towers, and courtyards, couldn't be patrolled adequately by professors, prefects, and the student council alone. And who's to say professors and prefects wouldn't be attacked? If such a situation occurred, forget the students. Very few at the school could handle it. Keep this as discreet as possible, Amasta. Some students, McGonagall chose her words carefully, especially those in Gryffindor, are particularly fond of adventures. Amasta readily agreed. McGonagall pressed her lips together, as if noting that he had no idea just how troublesome some Gryffindors could be. Shall we go have lunch together, Professor? With the discussion concluded, Amasta was in reasonably good spirits and invited her to the Great Hall. No, I have many things to attend to. I'll have the house elves prepare something for me later. Professor McGonagall stood up and watched Amasta head toward the door. But just as he reached it, she suddenly seemed to remember something and hurriedly called him back. Facing a slightly confused Amasta, she looked a little troubled. There's something I just thought of, Amasta. I haven't had a chance to consult Headmaster Dumbledore about it yet. Maybe you could help? Amasta blinked. McGonagall was always decisive and efficient, not the indecisive type. What could possibly be troubling her so? Have you ever heard of Gilderoy Lockhart? Her expression was interesting, half annoyance, half helplessness. If you mean the best-selling author, Amasta was surprised. Yes, I've heard of him, Professor. His books are very popular. I've seen people reading his thrilling adventures in many other European countries. I've even read some myself. They're quite entertaining. He's quite a storyteller. Are you asking if I could get his autograph? That's not it. McGonagall shook her head sharply as if shooing away an irritating insect, speaking with mild exasperation. He's currently teaching at the school, invited by Headmaster Dumbledore. Oh, it seemed McGonagall wasn't particularly fond of the celebrity author. Amasta's eyes widened. Well, I'd imagine the young witches and wizards love him, so? How shall I put it? McGonagall wasn't one to gossip about colleagues, and that wasn't her style. But as deputy headmistress, she was responsible for Hogwarts' teaching quality. Professor Lockhart may know a thing or two about writing books, but he doesn't seem particularly skilled at teaching. You know, Amasta, 5th years face OWLs, and 7th years have NEWTs coming up. It's crucial for their futures. Several students have already told me they can't get any help or improvement from Professor Lockhart. So, I just thought. Her gaze turned expectant, fixed on Amasta. Perhaps he could use an assistant. Amasta furrowed his brow. His primary mission at Hogwarts was to locate the Chamber of Secrets and recover the Slytherin heirlooms within. To do that, he had to monitor the students' behavior around the clock. Taking on an assistant role for a professor would mean leaving his monitoring post during the day, completely counterproductive. If you're willing, I could discuss it with Headmaster Dumbledore and have him paid at the standard professor's salary. Offering to bribe me with money? McGonagall, that's not like you. Amasta asked firmly. I wouldn't be grading assignments, right? By the way, which class does this Lockhart teach? Sorry, I'm not very good with divination. Has Professor Kettleburn retired? Not divination or care of magical creatures, Amasta. For once, McGonagall looked unusually cautious. Yes, it's defense against the dark arts. Clang! Amasta spun around decisively and slammed the door behind him. Sorry, farewell. Chapter 22, Strange Behavior. The rumors about Hogwarts' defense against the dark arts being cursed by a mysterious person weren't entirely unfounded. During Amasta's years at Hogwarts, he had never seen a defense against the dark arts professor leave the school standing freely at the end of their one-year term. Many would move seamlessly from Hogwarts to St. Mungo's, earning money here while attending to patients there, without missing a beat. Although Professor McGonagall had only invited him to serve as a teaching assistant, that didn't mean there were no risks. Amasta had no intention of using the money he earned through his own hard work to boost St. Mungo's performance. Most of the groundwork had been taken care of, but that didn't mean Amasta had nothing to do. During the week Mr. Bands spent preparing the panoramic telescopes, Amasta needed to familiarize himself with the castle all over again, especially the remote areas that didn't interfere with students or professors. Those spots that should be sealed off, he would seal. He also needed to plan the exact surveillance points according to the castle's architecture, designing a network with no blind spots. In his plan, everything in the activity areas would be monitored, except classrooms, common rooms for the 4 houses, dormitories, and private spaces like bathrooms. Actually, with his skill, adding a sound monitoring function to the panoramic telescopes wouldn't be difficult at all. But that would be over the top. Few professors would agree. So, after careful thought, he abandoned the idea. Hagrid, you're definitely hiding something. A shout from the far end of the corridor snapped Amasta out of his thoughts. From what he knew, very few students had stayed at school over the Christmas holidays. Stop snooping, Harry and Ron. The rough voice sounded impatient. I'm not hiding any secrets. Harry, Ron, and Hagrid? Amasta raised an eyebrow and squinted down the corridor. Was that crisp voice really Harry Potter's? Finally, he was about to meet this prodigy of the wizarding world. His heartbeat quickened involuntarily, his eyes shining with curiosity and anticipation. You know, Hagrid, your eyes dart around whenever you lie. Harry and Ron pressed close behind Hagrid, demanding answers. You said downstairs you'd ask Headmaster Dumbledore about Brain being a ministry investigator, but upstairs you suddenly changed your mind. Why, Hagrid? And you look scared, Ron pointed out sharply. Ministry investigator? Amasta scratched his head, puzzled. Since when had he said anything about that? Why can't you just be honest, Hagrid? A massive figure loomed at the far end of the corridor, 2 smaller shapes clinging to him. They approached the middle of the corridor quickly, while Harry kept chattering, trying to get Hagrid to reveal his secret. Sharp instincts told Harry that whatever Hagrid was hiding was extremely important. Hey, Harry! Ron noticed Amasta first. He grabbed Harry's robe and whispered, Look over there. Who's that? Hagrid abruptly stopped, frozen in place. Harry, caught off guard, ran into Hagrid's waist. The area seemed reinforced with a hard dragon leather belt, making Harry's nose ache quite a bit. Why the sudden stop, Hagrid? Rubbing his bent nose, Harry muttered unhappily, Did you change your mind again? Hagrid didn't answer. His expression was fascinating. Behind his thick beard, his sun-weathered face went pale the instant he noticed Amasta. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead, and his large hands fumbled nervously over his upper body, as if checking whether his outfit was in order. Your brain? Hagrid's smile was awkward. He looked uneasily at Amasta, whose expression was unreadable, and stammered, It's been a long time. I heard you're working for the ministry now. Congratulations. I'm glad you found a good job. Hagrid had served as gamekeeper at Hogwarts for decades, seeing generation after generation of students graduate. By seniority, he even outshone the heads of the 4 houses. Naturally, Amasta recognized him. Still, they had no real friendship. Their only prior contact had been the night before Christmas during Amasta's 5th year, after the encounter with the Black Witch. Following a search led by Dumbledore in the area of that battle, there had been no private interactions, at most a nod or greeting in passing. Yet, despite the lack of friendship, there had been no conflicts. So why, upon seeing him, did Hagrid react like this? And why did he seem so concerned about Amasta returning to school as an investigator? Confusion churned in Amasta's mind. It has indeed been a long time, Mr. Hagrid. Amasta furrowed his brow but decided to temporarily ignore Hagrid's odd behavior. He glanced at the freckled little boy beside Hagrid and immediately recognized him. There was no mistaking that shock of red hair, identical to Bill and Charlie's. Amasta noticed the restraint in Ron's gaze, which wasn't surprising. It's natural for 13 or 14-year-old witches and wizards to be wary of an unfamiliar adult. What puzzled him, however, was the faint mix of admiration and fear he detected in Ron's eyes. Ah, a Weasley child. Maybe he's heard from his family that I once fought his two older brothers? Just as Amasta prepared to smile at Ron and greet him, another boy suddenly appeared from behind Hagrid. He was fairly clean-cut, green-eyed, with messy hair, frail-looking, and he regarded Amasta with almost the same intense curiosity as Ron. The moment Amasta laid eyes on the boy, a sudden dizziness hit him like a muffled thunderclap exploding inside his head, leaving him disoriented and barely able to stay on his feet. Oh! Seeing Amasta nearly stumble, Hagrid quickly stepped forward and steadied him by the shoulders. What's wrong, Amasta? You look like you've been hit with a stunning spell. Behind Hagrid, Harry and Ron exchanged subtle glances, both sensing the shock in each other's eyes. Why did this Slytherin senior, who had driven away a powerful intruding dark witch in 5th year and even faced off with Headmaster Dumbledore, appear so weak and disoriented? Oh, thank you, Hagrid. I probably got up too early this morning and felt dizzy from the cold wind. Could you let go of my shoulders? They're about to snap, Amasta said, massaging his temples with a frown, quietly processing the unexpected surge of information in his mind. After a moment, Amasta finally felt steady again. His expression returned to normal, and he smiled as he studied the young wizard in front of him, the one who, according to Professor Snape, was arrogant, overconfident, cunning, and insolent. His gaze finally landed on the scar on the boy's forehead. So I believe I've met the famous Harry Potter? Since entering the wizarding world, Harry had long grown accustomed to strangers showing intense interest in his scar. But now, realizing this man had been sent to Hogwarts to investigate the Chamber of Secrets attacks, and that Amasta might well be the rumored Slytherin heir, Harry felt distinctly uneasy, as if the next second the man might pull handcuffs from his pocket and restrain him. Oh no, that's what Muggle police do. Wizards would usually confiscate the culprit's wand first. Good day, Mr. Brain. You've identified me correctly, Amasta said. His unassuming gaze made Harry squirm instinctively. He edged closer to Hagrid for reassurance, but thinking of Amasta's impressive record quickly erased any sense of security Hagrid's massive frame had provided. Chapter 23, The Lost Item. Say something, Harry. Each of Amasta, Hagrid, and Harry had a head full of thoughts, and no one spoke, leaving Ron completely flustered. He glanced curiously at Amasta, then winked and gestured at Harry, utterly frantic with excitement. Amasta was the first to break the silence. He nodded at Harry and smiled warmly. Last night I stayed at Professor Snape's. We had a candid talk about his thoughts on you. Harry's heart felt as if a cold hand had suddenly gripped it, sending a bone-chilling shiver racing through his entire body. He didn't need to ask. He already had a good idea of how Snape might judge him. Anxiety coiled in his stomach as he clenched his fists, racking his brain for something, anything, to defend himself. But Amasta's next words pulled him out of that abyss of fear. Of course, those opinions are only Professor Snape's personal views. They may not be entirely objective. Personally, I believe that to truly understand someone, you have to see for yourself. Blindly trusting someone else's perspective is never wise. Harry's tense shoulders dropped all at once, like a suffocating man finally inhaling fresh air. Watching the tiny wizard so visibly on edge, Amasta smiled quietly to himself, realizing why Harry Potter often seemed so intimidated in his presence. Under normal circumstances, Amasta might have teased him a bit more, but the sudden flash of information that had popped into his mind earlier made him abandon any thought of mischief. There were more pressing matters to confirm. By the way, Hagrid, I forgot to tell you, the commission to investigate the Chamber of Secrets didn't come from the Ministry. It came from the Hogwarts Board of Governors. He exchanged a few brief pleasantries with the hunched Hagrid, then strode off briskly. Rounding a stairwell corner, Amasta suddenly remembered something, waved to Hagrid perched above, and disappeared from sight. Once Amasta's footsteps faded, the three standing at the foot of the stairs exhaled in unison. Ron couldn't wait to speak. He's really terrifying, isn't he? His ears were red, and he seemed almost overly excited. When he looked at me, it felt like facing Dumbledore. Friendly as he seemed, you couldn't dare to breathe. He really does give off a different kind of presence. Harry, still shaken, nodded in agreement. He recalled Brain's unmistakable eyes, secretly comparing them to Dumbledore's penetrating gaze, trying to measure the two against each other. I never thought a Slytherin wizard could talk to someone politely without slipping into that obnoxious, oily charm, or sarcasm. Right, Hagrid? Perhaps because Amasta hadn't interrogated him, Harry's morning-long anxiety melted away, replaced by a surge of curiosity and excitement. Just now, Mr. Brain was right here, Hagrid. If you had questions, why didn't you ask him directly? Hagrid didn't respond. His cheeks puffed up as he stared blankly at the stairwell corner, looking like he had a dead mouse stuck in his mouth. Ah, a marvelous misunderstanding. Harry and Ron jumped at the sudden eerie exclamation. Before they could complain, Hagrid's face broke into a bright grin. I get it now. It's the Board of Governors, not the Ministry. They probably just wanted to tick a box. What are you talking about, Hagrid? Harry and Ron exchanged glances. Ron frowned. Do you have to be all mysterious about it? I already told you, Ron. Hagrid waved a finger cheerfully between them. I'm not hiding anything. Sorry, Harry, I have to go now. Fang's waiting at home to be fed. I don't want him tearing apart my bed looking for food. Passing through the entrance hall, Amasta paused to glance at the Great Hall. Snape had apparently left school for the day. McGonagall remained busy in her small office. The hall was empty, except for two large Slytherin students crammed together at the table, eating noisily, oblivious to Amasta's gaze. Their voracious appetites made him rub his stomach again, but he didn't enter. Instead, he headed straight for the basement passage. This complex, shadowy labyrinth of underground corridors had been his domain for 7 years. Even after being away for 3, the ingrained memory allowed him to navigate effortlessly. Oh, I almost forgot. The password. Amasta reached a dark brown stone wall and smacked his forehead in frustration. Now he faced 2 options. Wait here to see if anyone came through, or traverse the passage again to seek help from the 2 Slytherin students in the Great Hall. He frowned for a moment, then decided to take a third path. Glory. Amasta muttered to the stone wall, but nothing happened. All right, not that. Let me think. Sacred family? Still, the wall remained inert. Frowning, Amasta tried several more times before guessing uncertainly. Pure blood? Click. The stone door finally swung open. Heh, the old trick still works. Amasta smiled broadly, proud of his own cleverness, and stepped inside, surveying the changes in the Slytherin common room. Deep underground, unlike the eerie, greenish lounge by the Black Lake, the common room here was dark and gloomy. Even the roaring fireplace could not dispel its sinister, foreboding atmosphere, which carried a faint tinge of damp earth. I thought it'd be another 2 hours before you returned. From a high-backed chair by the fireplace, a lazy voice called out, its owner still sounding as if he hadn't fully shed his adolescent voice, giving it a particularly sharp and biting edge. Or have you 2 finally eaten Hogwarts out of house and home? I suppose you must be Draco Malfoy. Clang! The instant Draco heard Amasta's voice, he flung down his quill, reacting within a second, diving behind the nearest sofa. By the time he hit the ground, his wand was already in his hand. Who are you? How did you get in here? Amasta's eyelids twitched. The blonde, gray-eyed wizard's reflexes under threat were impressive. No need to worry, Mr. Malfoy, Amasta said, ignoring the wand pointed directly at him. He smiled lightly. My name is Amostar Brain. May I sit and talk, Mr. Malfoy? 20 minutes later, after Amasta had explained his background, Draco's eyes gleamed. He tilted his chin, appraising Amasta as if judging the competence of a servant. Your father sent you, right? I suppose you know he's one of the 12 members of the school board. Strange. I thought he'd try to get the old geezer Dumbledore out of the school, but instead, He sends you? Amasta was not surprised by this young Malfoy's arrogance. As a Slytherin, he knew exactly how the pure-blood heirs acted. But Lucius Malfoy planning to remove Dumbledore? Interesting. That explains why he and the Greengrass family voted against Dumbledore during the board meeting, afraid of